Hi. Okay, so I thought today we would have a look at kind of very fast prototyping inside 3ds Max. A kind of what we're going to do is we're going to establish an environment that is lit with a kind of ambient skylight that gives us soft shadows. It's not the highest rendered or highest quality rendering environment that you're going to see, but it gives you enough soft shadowing to allow you to kind of just play with some of the primitives and some of the modifiers. So there's a couple little setups that we need to go through first just to establish the environment properly. So I'll just step you through those and then I'll explain why I think this is possibly a good approach given the project that you're currently doing. So here we go. So first things first, once you've launched Max, this is my startup window, but I'll talk you through how this was set up. So the first thing I did is I went to customize and I made sure that my unit setups were centimeters for the display units and also centimeters for the system unit scale. The reason we're doing that is simply that if we make an object in here that we particularly like, we can transfer it over to Unreal and the scaling will be exact. Okay, so unit setup. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the render engine that we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to go up to the render setup window. That's F10 on the keyboard, or it's this little window up here. And when we get there, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking to establish or select the scanline renderer. Okay, so pretty simple, just make sure it says scanline there, and down here underneath common parameters, in case it's not open, you just open it up there. I've got it set to HDTV 1280 by 720. Now what I'm going to recommend is that we drop that down because the larger this window, the longer the render time. So if we say 960 and hit tab, so the tab key, 3 down on the left hand side of your keyboard, it will establish the correct height for the width that I've just put in. So 960 540 will give us enough size to review the image, but equally speed up the rendering time slightly. Okay. The other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to go into the advanced lighting window. And from the drop-down menu here, we're going to be choosing Light Tracer. I'm not going to say yes to this now because I've got some settings in here that I want to keep, so I don't want to discard that particular lighting solution. So I'll just say no for the time being. But later on, you'll just say yes and you'll set up the standard parameters there with Light Tracer, and then we'll adjust them in a little while. Okay. So we've set up the common renderer, HDTV 960 by 540, and we've set up the advanced lighting and we've chosen Light Tracer. Okay, once we've done that, we'll just close that down for a moment. In the actual environment, all I've created so far, I'll just I'm just going to use I say this to you all the time, but just to kind of get in the habit of it, your left hand is on the keyboard all the time. Put your phone down and put your hand on the keyboard. In fact, hide your phone. It's a distraction. Put your thumb on the Alt key and your index finger on the W, and you can toggle the quad view to the maximized viewport. So whichever one you're in. So I'm going to go Alt W, takes me to the perspective window. That's what I want. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just scrolling on the middle mouse wheel there to zoom out a little bit, just to show you the simplicity of the environment that I've got going here. Okay, so the ground plane, I'll just go to it. So I'll get my move tool, make sure I'm choosing the ground plane. There it is. Oh, by the way, if you haven't got this window available, you can just click on Toggle Scene Explorer, and it'll open it and close it for you. It's good to have it open. Okay, lets you quickly select an object like a plane. And I'll just give you the parameters for that ground plane that I set up. It's just 10,000 centimeters by 10,000 centimeters. That's big enough for what I'm doing. Okay. I'm not concerned overly about the segmentation here. 4 and 4 is fine. 1 and 1's fine, but 4 and 4 is equally fine. We're not doing anything great with the ground floor. It's just going to be used to catch ground shadows, that's all. Okay, so that's the ground plane, and I'm going to freeze it so I can't accidentally click it now. So in the Scene Explorer, I've just clicked on the frozen button. That's nice and useful. The other thing is, in here, I've got a skylight. And the skylight, its positioning is unimportant. It's basically creating a lighting dome over the whole environment. And if I just pause there for a second, I've clicked on Help previously, and I've launched a Autodesk window, and I'll show you that Autodesk window. He says, looking for it. So here it is. I'll just pull it into view. Okay, so I'll pull that across so you can see it. Oh, come on. Come on. That's it. So when you hit Help, the Autodesk window jumps into view, and if you hit Skylight, you get a whole bunch of information in here. I think it's actually Skylight, one word, and that'll get us there. Okay, so in effect, this is what's going on with the skylight. It's putting a kind of invisible dome that is firing light rays into the scene, giving you this soft shadowing. It's simple to use, and we're going to be using it in conjunction with something called Light Tracer. So all you need to do, if you want to read more about it, I'll go through these parameter setups, the basic parameter settings that we need in a moment. But if you want to read more about it, which of course is always a good thing, you can get that in the Help menu. Similarly, if you want to read more about Light Tracer, it's also in the Help menu. And the parameter setups are discussed there, and the way that you use Light Tracer is also discussed there for more detail. These help documents are just fantastic. They've been written now for nearly 15 years and improved upon year on year. So the way that they're structured is pretty fantastic. And if you print all this out, it's a colossal document. Years ago, prior to having it all on the internet, they used to deliver it with the software, and I don't know what to equate it to. It was it was huge. It was like about 6, 7, 8 telephone directories of data. So it's a pretty comprehensive help system if you want to read. Okay. So we've got a skylight, and the simple way to set your skylight up is you go into your Create window over here in the Command panel, go to your lights, and go to, make sure it's on Standard, and just choose Skylight. Click Skylight, and then click anywhere in the space, and you will create your skylight. Once you've created it once, turn it off. Oh, actually, just go to back to your Move tool, select your Move tool again, and it'll stop you creating lots and lots of little skylights all over the place by accident. Okay, so we only need one. Once it's in the scene, make sure that you have, I'll just select it, go to the Modifier tab, and just make sure that it's on. We're using a sky color of white. Of course, you can change that. You can actually use a HDR map and an environment map, etc., but we won't do that today. That's not our concern. We're just going to use it on 1, and I've got Cast Shadows available. Now, you should be able to turn that on. I think it's grayed out for me because I've also got the Light Tracer active, so I'll have to review that if it doesn't actually turn on for you. But basically, Cast Shadows should be turned on, and I think Light Tracer might be causing that to be grayed out. Okay. So I will also show you, so basically I've got my ground plane, I've got my skylight, I'm going to freeze it as well, I don't need to do anything with it. I've also created a reference object in here, which I recommend you do. and I've just called it a bot box, representing the height of a AI bot inside Unreal. So it's just a straightforward box primitive with the following parameters: 40, 40, 190. And that just gives you a little reference to a human scale or an AI scale inside Unreal. Okay, so it's basically your little human figure. Again, I'll freeze him because I don't need him to do anything at this particular point. Okay, and the last thing, or the first thing I've modelled beyond that, and this is where things are going to get hopefully quite interesting, is this little box, and I'll just show you, it's a fairly random size. I'll just show you the inside the modifier stack. I'll come to these two elements in a moment. It's a standard box, and I've got a length of, let's call it 700. I've got a width of, let's call it 25, and I've got a height of, let's call it 700 again. Okay. The important thing here is that I have got segmentation of 32 in the height segment parameter typing area. So 32 in there. Now, if you can't see your segmentation, just hit F4 on your keyboard and your segmentation will disappear or appear like mine. So we want a shaded view and we want to be able to see the segments. Okay, do that. And obviously I'm just going to step through here, but as you can pause the video, create the element and then start the video again. That's kind of what I'm expecting you to do. So, okay, basic object set up. We've got our reference height object. We've got a basic object we're going to start working with in terms of adding some modifiers to it. But before we do that, we're just going to add a simple material to everything in the scene. And we're only going to use one material for everything. So I'll just show you what it is. If you call up your materials, so M on the keyboard pulls up your materials. And you'll probably have a physical material as your top left-hand material. I've changed that out and I'll show you how and why I've done that. So you just click on the word physical material and in the typing at the top, just put in standard. And what you'll see is standard legacy. And that's what we want. We just want a standard legacy material. So you click that, you end up with the same as me, standard legacy material. The only thing I've done in here, it's using something called a blend shader, which is absolutely fine for what we're doing. And the only thing I've done is I've turned the glossiness to 0. So I haven't got any glossy reflections. That's all I've got. That's all I've done. I haven't changed the grey colour at all because it's kind of perfect for what we're doing. This is something they do in architecture all the time, and they call it, they're like light studies of geometry that they're working with. So we've created a standard material, and we select the objects, and we just simply hit the Assign Material to Selection button, and those objects receive that material. Whenever you create a new object, just apply the same material to it. That's all you want to do. Okay, so all good so far. Quick recap. I'm just going to choose my little character there, hit Z to zoom in, and I'll just peel back a little bit. I'll just go up here and I'll say, in my perspective window, I'm just going to say show safe frame. That show safe frame under perspective allows me to see what will be rendered in my scene. So I like to be able to see what it is that I'm rendering in that scene. So if I just say, that's pretty much, I'm just using Alt and it'll be middle mouse for you. I reconfigured my mouse because I prefer right click for the orbit command. But Alt and middle mouse button for you will give you the orbit command, and it's pretty essential really that you can do this at any time. Orbit around it. I never use that wheel in the top right hand corner. Yeah. Ever since I tried it when it first came years ago, but it doesn't really do it for me. It's unnecessary. But okay, here we go. So orbit, and all I'm going to do is do a quick F9. and my window, which is on a different screen, will launch, and this is what I'll get. A little grey world with some soft shadows around here. There's some little weird artifacts there, but we can deal with that another time. We're not here looking for render perfection. What we're looking for is a nice workspace that we can experiment with new modeling forms. So that's really what we're using it for. So I'll just slide that onto my other monitor and bring it back into view every now and then. So, okay. This box here, this very first box that I'm working with, the first modifier that I've applied to it is a modifier called the bend modifier, and you'll find it inside the modifier list. There it is. When it lands, I've just I'll turn the eye on so you can see the effect of the bend modifier, and all I've done is I've changed the angle. Of course, this can be animated, but that again is for another time. But we can make all manner of shapes. It wouldn't bend if it didn't have that height segmentation. If I want to do kind of like funky twists and things with it, I'm going to have to go back to the box and add segmentation to the width as well. So I'm going to say 32 on the width. And now when I go to the bend, am I seeing my width segmentation? Interesting that I'm not reading it for some reason. I should see my subdivision across it. You know what? That's because I've done it the wrong way around. It should be in my lengths, not my width. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, so basically we're just looking for a nice grid like that will allow us to do things like bend this object. So yeah, how it'll go with that, what you might find straight away is that when you put the bend modifier on, you're going to get some little issues around which axis it's functioning on. So you have to just be conscious of which axis it's actually going to function on. And you can decide which axis you want it to function on, obviously. And you can see the x-axis, because there are no subdivisions in the width parameter, remember they're still on 1, it's not doing anything. So that one's never going to work. The y and the z are going to work for us in this instance. I was using z, and I was using something like that to kind of put a shape over my little character, like so. Okay, now the only other thing, and this is just a little funky thing which we can turn on and off, and we can discard it and play with it if we want, is I've added something called a symmetry modifier on here. Symmetry modifier, again, when it first lands, doesn't always do what you want it to do, and you have to do a little bit of messing around with the mirror axis. And additionally, you may well have to open up this little tiny arrow and click on mirror, and then you can move the axis, the symmetry mirror in different axes and positions. Now this will become apparent we're doing in a moment. Okay, so if I say, well, you know what, I want this to operate on the z-axis, turn off that, turn that, suddenly it might disappear. And you think, well, it's operating on the z-axis, so why don't I pull it up on the z-axis to see what it's doing? And then you can see what it does. So I'm going to put it back. I don't want that at this moment, but it's kind of interesting straight off. I'm kind of interested in the fact that it's doing something unexpected, and I'm looking to create interesting forms and shapes. But for the moment, I was pretty happy using it on the y-axis. I'll show you why in a second. Show what I was doing with it in a second. So on the y-axis, it's doing that. So obviously, it's a mirror. It's a mirror of what we're doing. So if I say put it there and then go back to the bend modifier, and this time I change the direction of the bend modifier, I'm going to create something. There's two modifiers operating together here now. And you can create some really interesting shapes. And, you know, we can make this one piece of geometry later on, but for the time being, it's fine using this method, this parameter modifier stack method. It's a really good way of working because we can at any moment say, you know, I don't want to use that symmetry modifier, and put it in the bin. Okay, I just Control Z'd there to undo my deletion of the modifier. So, why would I really do this? Now, I think you guys are working on a complex problem of imagining a new environment, a new college environment. Now, one of the things that I would recommend is that you obviously generate some kind of prototype. Now, I know quite a few of you have researched a chap called Frank Gehry, and you've looked at the Bilbao Museum and other museums and other buildings that he's worked on, and he does these incredible new forms, which when they first arrived were just, you know, astonishing. People were astonished by this, but of course all of this was capable because of new computerization. You may find that his initial ideas began with something like this. A little drawing, an overhead view as if he was looking down on how he would like all the kind of various objects to relate to each other. There's a little bit of water flowing through or something he's using there. This is really how simple it all starts. In fact, if you really look at it, he used these pieces of curled paper and card to construct his models in advance. You know, this is time-consuming stuff. This is time-consuming stuff. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, you are talking many, many millions of pounds being spent on his eventual architectural structure. But it began like this. Simple, you know, and this is an architectural practice that is very, very old. Working with paper and card and pencil and drawing things out. Well, that's to be encouraged, and it's a really good way to experiment with new form. But, you know, think about his drawings. You know, these are his drawings. You know, these become valuable artifacts as well. And eventually you start thinking, wow, he's doing some really interesting things here. And actually all he's doing is he's playing with form. And so, back to today. This is really what we're doing. We are going to play with form. I'll just tuck that away into my other window over there. Give me 1 second. And back over there. Oh, can't quite lock that one. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to play with form, and we're just going to use boxes that have subdivisions and modifiers to bend and twist them as if they were pieces of paper. Okay, so there's my first object. Little bit of a box, some subdivision, a bend modifier, and a symmetry modifier. And while I'm working, I want to do a quick render of my scene. So I'll say F9. I'll just do a quick render, quick F9 of my scene to start to see what kind of shape that I'm producing. And it's looking interesting. Don't know what it is. It's not about what it is. It's about how the forms relate to one another. That's all we're interested in. Okay, so that's kind of nice. It'd be good if I could share both monitors simultaneously, so I don't have to drag this one in and out, but I don't think I can. So let's have a little look. Let's take that form, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to duplicate that whole form. So if I just hold the Shift key and go on the Y-axis, click and drag, there it is as a copy. That's kind of nice. And just to go back to what I was doing before, I'm now going to go to the symmetry mod, and I'm going to use the Z-axis, turn off the Y. So for this other form that I've got, I quite liked what it was doing there. It's a pretty complicated piece of geometry. So I'm just going to use the way that that mirror form operates there and just see what I can do. If I lift that a little bit, I think I'm going to lift it, and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate the whole object over. And actually I'll undo that, and I'll just show you before I rotate. I should always put on these angle snaps, because that means that when I rotate it, it goes over in 5-degree intervals, and it's much easier just to land it exactly where you want it. So I've got another little form there. It's kind of interesting. Don't know what it's doing, but you know what? I'm going to duplicate it yet again. And this time I'm going to rotate it that way. You know what? I'll delete that. I'll show you something else. Rather than duplicating it like that, I wonder if I could add another symmetry modifier to that stack and see what happens. Oh, right, that's interesting. So the symmetry modifier is setting this up. Quite interesting indeed. Okay, what if I change the axis for that? So that one, I'll put it on, it's doing it on the z-axis and the y-axis. And it's giving me a really interesting form now. So, you know what, I'm going to right click on this, box 1, and I'm just going to go over to my Scene Explorer. I'm just going to turn it off and hide it for a moment, because I'm kind of more interested in this object now. And I want to just put it there, and I want to look at that in how it relates to my little human character. Okay, starting to get interesting. Let's have a little look. I'll just do a quick F9 render. F9 is just a fast render, and here he comes into view. Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is interesting. I want to remember that form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Save, and I will save it as a JPEG. So I'll just call it ArcViz Play Render 01, and I'll make sure that the format in this case is going to be a JPEG. So just change that to JPEG and just pop it on the desktop, and then I can put them in a folder later on. Good. Okay, so a little interesting form. Let's pop that one to the side. Let's start again with something else. Let's make a new one. So I'll hide box 2. And now I'm going to put a new form in here. So looking at my standard primitives, there's a whole bunch of things that we can start to play with, of course. Let's try a geosphere. So I'll drag out a little geosphere like so, and geospheres are really interesting in that, I'll just position it like that. They're kind of cool because they've got an inbuilt hemisphere option, and if I just tick that little box there, hemisphere, the geosphere becomes halved, and actually doesn't have to be halved. There's a way of increasing or decreasing that, but it gives you a very fast hemisphere. What I'm going to do now is just going to lift it up a little bit, and I want to look underneath it. And I'm just going to go F3 into wireframe mode, and what you'll find is that if I go to the hemisphere, well, I'll just show you. F3, I'll just turn off that ground plane. F3, it's a solid object. See that? It's a very solid object. If I want to make this a hollow hemisphere, which I do, I have to do a little kind of maneuver with it. So I'm going to right click on it, go to Editable Poly, or Convert to Editable Poly, and then inside the Editable Poly, I'm going to go to the Selection Vertex, Subobjects. This is called the Subobject Vertex. Select that one just in the middle. Now, accidents can happen here. You can accidentally select the vertex on the other side of the object. So to stop us doing that, we choose Ignore Backfacing, and now anything that's on the other side won't get accidentally picked. I choose that vertex, I say delete, and now it's hollowed out. Great stuff. So it's hollowed out, and what I'm going to do is add a little modifier to it, and this modifier is going to be called shell. There it is. And the little shell modifier gives me a little thickness to my object. I've got an inner amount and an outer amount and segmentation. So I'm just going to set them both to 1. I might even go to 2 centimeters, giving that little bit of thickness, and 2. So we've got a little interesting form there. Okay, same thing. Call up the materials, give it a standard material. Let's have a little look at it. So turn my ground plane back on. I'm going to add something else to this object. I'm going to go to the modifier stack. So just select it, go to the modifier stack, and I'm going to add a slice plane. There it is. Slice plane is really interesting in that it'll chop a mesh in half for you. So I'm going to remove the positive or remove the negative. So in this instance, it's going to be the positive. So if I go inside, the little arrow there, hit slice plane and lift it up. And then get my rotation tool. Okay, that's my little object just being sliced. And I can decide what it is that I want that object to, or how it is I want that object to look. And it's kind of interesting like that to me. I'm going to say thank you very much for that. And I'm going to do another, no, I won't, there's no need to do another conversion. I'll just leave it as it is. Sometimes I like to tidy my models up and just convert them, but okay, I need to come out of there, make sure I'm out of there, back to my move tool, take my object, oh, can't quite get out of that slice plane for some reason, need to deselect it, come out, and back to here, and there we go, just slide it into position. Okay, and I'm going to go to front view, and I'm just going to make sure that it's kind of in a good position in relationship to that little box spot that we have there. Back to my perspective view. Let's do a quick review of this. So quick F9. I am making this up, by the way, as I go along. There's no pre-programmed plan here. I'm just showing you some tools, and I've not quite settled that object on the ground, and we've got a little bit of light sneaking through. However, it's kind of a funky little form, so I'll just sink it down into the ground a little bit more. Down here at the bottom of the screen, I'm going to hit right click on there, and that zeroes it out to the ground. Okay, fabulous. Now I'm going to put a symmetry mod on, just like I did before, because it's just popped into my head to do it. And my symmetry mod's going to do something interesting, I suspect, with this shape. Let's have a little look. It's on the y-axis. If I hit flip, it'll take it out there, and then I come across. Wow. You know how to make some really interesting forms with a couple little modifiers really, really quickly. I don't want to flip it actually. I preferred it when it was kind of like that, and some kind of form like that. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's nice. That's weird and interesting. So, what can I do? Can I go zoom in a little bit? Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, and go through. Yeah, go through. Now, if I really wanted to get fancy, I'd put a camera in there, and I'd get a kind of wide-angled camera and have a little look at the interior space. But for the moment, I'm not going to do that, because it'll just distract me from what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, so just widen that out a little bit, take another little view of it. Okay, just quick F9, quick little look at it. Oh, you know what? What I forgot to do earlier, I'll do it right now. I'll go back. I'll take a little step back. Okay, that's good. I would just save that for my sketchbook and build up lots and lots of little sketches about how I played with forms and generated various prototypes. And of course, remember, all these things are clonable. So, you know, you can just hit the shift key, clone it to get two forms, see how those forms interact and generate new objects and scenes. But anyway, I forgot to do this. A little bit of an oversight. You may be calling out at this point, why is this not working? Here we go. Back to F10, the scene render. I just want to go to, I established early on that these settings were going to give me fast, relatively fast, and relatively decent results. Not the best, but you know, it's a payoff. I don't want to get bogged down waiting 10 minutes for a render to appear on the screen. I want it to be pretty instantaneous and just give me enough shadow to let me know how the form is shaping up. Okay, so all I've done is I've set the ray samples to 2000 and I've set the adaptive undersampling to 8x8. I think pretty much everything else is as it was originally. So that's possibly the only thing you need to change. I'm pretty sure I've not done anything else. Okay, just a little recap on that. Okay, so let's have a little look at a couple other forms. So I'll hide that. I'll make a new one. I'm going to make a little box again in my scene. Just draw out my box. And look at that, it's remembering the width and height segments from the last time. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to use that simple box again like that. This time maybe I'll go, oh no, I'll leave those because I'm going to need those. I'll put in 32, it's a nice number to work with. I might go like that. Okay, this time I'm going to use a modifier called twist. Twist, there it is. And the twist modifier will let us do some pretty funky things like that. Now remember, if the segmentation wasn't there, this effect wouldn't happen. So if yours isn't twisting like this, you got to go back to the box and make sure that segmentation is sufficient to allow the twist to operate. And again, you get some pretty nice forms. Twist and bend. Put a little bend on this. And you're starting to get some really interesting forms. And remember, we're only here to experiment and play. That is the whole point of the exercise. It's just what Frank Gehry does. He folds pieces of paper, he twists them, he crumples them, he sees what happens when he does it over and over, and then he starts to say, well, I've got one there, and I've got another one here, and how do these two relate to each other? So he starts to gather them and see what happens when they intersect. And maybe he starts to, well, he can't do this, but we can. We can scale one form very quickly against another and see what happens when they cut through each other. And remember, I must put make sure I've put my grey material on there, which I think I have. What's my other objects? I've got this, so I'll take this object, I'll start to bring them into play. And yep, I have no idea. I mean, it's probably quite obvious I've got no idea because I'm literally just playing, but I think that bend might need to be a little bit stronger to get the effect. I think possibly that shape might also need what would happen if I put a twist on there? I'm making this up as I go along. Oh. It's doing some interesting and unexpected things, but I don't care. It's as long as it's interesting, I'm going to just play with it until something starts to happen. Okay, so I'll just take what I've got, I'll look at it as a playful expression of form. Quick F9. See what's going on. I have no idea how long this video has taken, so I'll look at the clock in a second. I'll just pause it in a second, have a little look at the clock. Excellent. Okay, good. So I've got just colliding pieces of geometry that have bends, twists. There's another nice one out there called taper, and there's a few other little modifiers that we can play with. But for the time being, I have a feeling these are sufficient for us, so I'm just going to give that a little rotation as well. If I take, there's my geosphere, if I take that one and just, I really like this twist actually, I've got to say, of all the shapes, that's the one that's been the kind of most pleasing to me. I just really like the way it operates. I think I'm just curious how it might operate as a space for somebody. Interesting little curved space. Quick F9, just get a sense of what it looks like. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so what happens if I take that and just do a little mirror symmetry mod on there, and I'll do it on the y-axis. Again, it's like, wow, what a shape. Fantastic. Do I want it on the z-axis? Probably not, just the y, I think. But how in... Well, alright, I'm getting a bit excited here. Oh, carried away here. Interesting little form. Okie doke. Okay, I think you get the idea. That's pretty good. Alright, so let's say I take that and I duplicate it. So Shift, come out of my symmetry mod. Just take it, duplicate it over there. I'm just going to try something. I'm just going to right click on that form, convert it to a polygon. So it's basically, if you look at the stack, everything, all the modifiers have disappeared, and it's just a piece of geometry now that we can do a few other little things with. So let's say I wanted something like a cylinder. Okay, there's my cylinder. And I'm just going to rotate that cylinder 90 degrees. 90. And I'm going to take that object, and you know what, I'm going to use this little align tool. Click that, align them so that they're kind of roughly in the same space. Align it like that. Align it like that. Okay, it's possibly a little bit big, that cylinder. I'll just reduce its size, its radius a little bit. And I'm going to lift it up a little tiny bit. Like that. Looks good, looks good. We can use a little function called Boolean. So we go up to our Create tab and we go down to Compound Objects. We use something called the Boolean or the Pro Boolean. Don't really use this very much, but we'll give it a go. This is going to allow us to do little funky things like that, hopefully. Cut a hole right through there, so you can use one object to cut a hole through the other, and it's just a case of selecting it, choosing the object that's like a cookie cutter sort of thing, choosing the object that you want to subtract from your original form. That looks good to me. That's what I was thinking a moment ago when I looked at the human figure or the little box. I thought, what if that character wanted to walk through that space? And there it is. I'm going to stop now because I think you've got enough to play with. So I'll just do that as a little final render. Just have a little look at that, how that form collapses over the character. In fact, what happens if I lift it up? No, that's not good. Put it back where it was. Okay, and this one, I'll just put him in the distance. Okay, quick F9. Nice enough. Interesting form. This object here, this one in the foreground, I could go crazy, and you know what, after you've done a Boolean, it's good practice to recollapse it back to a poly, and then I wonder what happens if I put a little turbo smooth on there. It just does a nice little job of smoothing things out, although I've got a bit of a weird ridge there which I'd have to deal with. It doesn't matter. You know what, turbo smooth is not what it's about at this point. It's just about playing with geometry and a set of modifiers. So I'll just turn these on and I'll click on them and I'll show you repeat. I use things like a shell modifier to give thickness to this dome. I used that one's a collapsed modifier, but remember I had a Boolean process there where I used a cylinder to cut a hole in it. In this one, I used a bend because I had sufficient subdivision to allow the bend to take place. I used a symmetry on the z-axis. I used a second symmetry on z and y. I used a twist modifier on it as well. This one was pretty straightforward as the first one. It was just a simple bend and symmetry mod. But very quickly, I'm making little forms that become playful geometric forms, and all of it is relating back to a human scale, 1.9 meters tall. You can get some kind of sense of scale of how a building might operate with somebody in relation to it. So I'll just do a quick F9 and then I think I definitely will stop. Yep, I will. Brilliant. Okay, so I would normally save the max file out as version 1. I would then save the JPEGs out, pop that in my journal, my sketchbook or whatever as kind of reference objects. And you just build up your objects of play until you're happy with what's going along. There's lots of very simple standard primitives to play with. We've got tubes and pyramids and toruses and all sorts of things that you can just pop in there. Make sure that it's got the right subdivisions. And then you can use your various modifiers with your new forms. So back to your modifier tab. Quick one, I did say stop, but it's so compulsive once you get in here. It's like it's hard to stop. Just stick with the standard bending and twisting forms at this point because they're good enough to start making some really interesting objects. Yeah, okay, enough. And stop. Okay, right, stop it. Okay, I'm going to stop now. That's a lot to go on with. I'll just do a tiny recap on the lighting setup. So it was just a skylight with shadows on, and we used a light tracer, which was available inside advanced lighting in here, and I just changed the ray samples and the initial sample spacing. That's all I did. Okay, so I'll stop right there. Delete that one, don't need that. And I'll save my file. 1, 2, 3, save as ArcViz play 01. Oh, play 01. Boosh, in we go. Good enough. All right, over and out, I believe.